The massive doors of the Galactic Council chambers opened with a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the vast hall. Jake Morrison adjusted his uniform and walked forward with steady steps. Behind him, Lisa Barnes carried the official documents that represented Earth's hopes for peaceful integration into the galactic community. They had traveled for months to reach this moment, crossing impossible distances to stand before the most powerful beings in the known universe. The chamber was enormous beyond human imagination. Crystalline walls stretched upward until they disappeared into shadows, and strange lights danced across surfaces that seemed to shift and change with each passing moment. Hundreds of alien delegates filled the tiered seating, their forms so varied that Jake's mind struggled to process them all. Some floated in spheres of glowing gas, others stood on multiple legs that clicked against the polished floor, and a few seemed to exist as pure energy contained within geometric shapes. At the center of it all sat the High Council, 12 beings who had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. High Counselor Veltar dominated the central position, his massive frame covered in scales that reflected the chamber's strange lights. His eyes, each the size of a human head, turned toward the human delegation with what Jake hoped was curiosity. Rather than hostility, Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthek Empire rose from his position near the front of the chamber. His species looked almost human except for the extra arms and the way his skin seemed to ripple like liquid metal. He had been the most vocal opponent of human membership in the Council, and his presence here today filled Jake with a cold dread. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Zethkar began, his voice somehow reaching every corner of the enormous chamber without technological assistance. "We gather today to address a matter of grave importance to the stability and peace of our galaxy. The species known as humans has requested membership in our ancient alliance, but I submit to you that this request poses a clear and present danger to everything we have built." Jake felt Lisa tense beside him. They had expected opposition, but the formal tone suggested this was more than a simple debate. This felt like a trial, and they were the accused. Zethkar activated a holographic display that filled the space above the chamber floor. Images of Earth appeared, showing cities, armies, and spacecraft. The technology was primitive by galactic standards, but the images had been carefully selected to emphasize military installations and weapon systems. "Observe their world," Zethkar continued. "In the brief time since we made contact, they have increased their military production by 300%. Their territorial expansion has accelerated beyond all previous patterns. They speak of peace while building weapons of unprecedented destructive power." The images shifted to show human colonies on Mars and the Moon, construction projects that had begun shortly after first contact with the galactic community. What the humans saw as natural expansion, the Council apparently viewed as aggressive militarization. "Furthermore," Zethkar said, his voice growing more intense, "their history demonstrates a clear pattern of violence and conquest. They have fought countless wars among themselves, using increasingly deadly weapons. What will they do when they possess the technology to wage war across star systems?" Jake wanted to speak, to defend his species, but the Council's protocols were strict. He could only listen as his people were painted as warmongers and threats to galactic peace. High Counselor Veltar leaned forward, his massive bulk shifting with surprising grace. "The human delegation may now present their case." Jake stepped forward, his heart pounding. Everything humanity had worked for during the past 5 years came down to this moment. "Honored Council, we come before you not as conquerors, but as students. Yes, humanity has a violent past, but we have learned from our mistakes. We seek to join the galactic community precisely because we understand that cooperation achieves more than conflict." He activated his own holographic display, showing images of Earth's recent achievements, medical advances that had eliminated diseases, environmental restoration projects that had cleaned polluted oceans, and the peaceful cooperation between former enemy nations in the joint space program. "We offer our unique perspective and our determination to contribute to galactic peace," Jake continued. "Our rapid technological advancement is not for conquest, but for exploration and discovery. We want to learn from the wisdom of elder species and add our voice to the Council's deliberations." The chamber fell silent as Jake finished speaking. For long moments no one moved or spoke. Then Counselor Yithdal of the Monitoring Division activated her communication device. "A human expansion pattern is indeed aggressive by galactic standards," she reported in a voice like crystalline chimes. "Their industrial capacity has grown exponentially since first contact. However, our analysis suggests this growth is driven by curiosity rather than malice." Zethkar immediately responded. "Curiosity or malice, the result is the same. They represent a destabilizing force in our carefully maintained balance of power. I propose we take action before their capabilities exceed our ability to contain." The word "contain" sent a chill through Jake's body. This wasn't a membership hearing anymore. This was something far more dangerous. High Counselor Veltar raised one massive hand, and the chamber fell silent again. "The Vorthic Empire has submitted a formal proposal for dealing with the human situation. All council members have reviewed the documentation. We will now proceed to vote." Jake realized with growing horror that this had all been decided before he and Lisa had even entered the chamber. The debate was a formality. The council had already chosen humanity's fate. "The proposal is simple," Veltar announced. "We will establish a quantum barrier around the human solar system. All communication will be severed, all trade suspended, and all diplomatic contact terminated. Humanity will be quarantined until they either destroy themselves or evolve beyond their current aggressive nature." The vote was swift and merciless. One by one, the ancient species that ruled the galaxy cast their decisions. The Crystalline Collective voted yes. The hive minds voted yes. The energy beings voted yes. Even species that Jake had thought might be sympathetic to humanity voted to imprison them in their own solar system. When the final vote was tallied, only 3 species had voted against the quarantine. Humanity would be cut off from the galaxy, trapped like animals in a cage, left to either destroy themselves or somehow prove they deserve freedom. Jake activated his emergency communicator, knowing it would be his last chance to send a message to Earth before the barriers activated. His words were simple but carried the weight of prophecy. "Command, this is Morrison. The Council has voted for quarantine. All contact will be severed in 1 hour. Tell everyone back home that they made a mistake today. When we return to the galaxy, we won't be the same species they locked away." The quantum barriers began forming around the edges of the solar system as Jake spoke, invisible walls that would trap humanity for decades to come. The council members filed out of the chamber, confident they had prevented a galactic war and preserved their ancient peace. None of them realized they had just created their own worst nightmare. 50 years had passed since the quantum barriers sealed humanity inside their solar system. The galaxy moved on without them, and most alien civilizations rarely thought about the quarantined species anymore. Trade routes flourished between the remaining council members, technology advanced at its usual steady pace, and peace seemed more secure than ever. The Galactic Council had forgotten about humanity, assuming they had either destroyed themselves in nuclear wars or fallen back into primitive barbarism. Dr. Amy Clark stood in the observation deck of Lunar Research Station, watching Earth slowly rotate below her. The blue marble looked different now than it had 5 decades ago. The angry red scars of pollution had healed, replaced by green forests and clean oceans. Cities still dotted the surface, but they were different cities built with technologies that no alien civilization had ever imagined. The transformation had been necessary because humanity had no choice but to change or die in their cosmic prison. Amy remembered the dark years. Immediately after the quarantine began, panic had swept across Earth as people realized they were truly alone. Some governments had tried to maintain the old ways of competing and fighting, but reality had crushed those attempts quickly. When you are trapped in a small space with limited resources and no hope of outside help, cooperation becomes the only option for survival. The breakthrough had come in the 7th year of isolation. Dr. Richard Hayes, Amy's predecessor, had made a discovery that changed everything. While examining the quantum barriers that imprisoned them, he found that human brains processed quantum information differently than alien minds. The Council had designed their prison based on their own understanding of physics, but human consciousness operated on principles they had never encountered. Amy walked through the research facility, past laboratories where teams of scientists worked on projects that would have seemed impossible before the quarantine. Without access to alien technology, humans had been forced to develop their own solutions to fundamental problems. The results were revolutionary in ways that the galaxy could not imagine. Commander Ryan Foster reviewed the daily reports from military installations across the solar system. The old Earth-based armies had disappeared years ago. Replaced by the unified Solar Defense Force, every human child now learned the same history, spoke the same languages, and understood their shared mission. They were no longer Americans or Chinese or Europeans. They were simply humans, united by their abandonment and determined to never be helpless again. Ryan's office overlooked the construction yards of Mars, where massive ships took shape in the red planet's thin atmosphere. These vessels looked nothing like the sleek designs preferred by galactic civilizations. Human ships were built for durability and functionality, designed by engineers who had learned to work with limited resources and unlimited determination. Every component was manufactured in the solar system. Every design principle developed through human ingenuity rather than borrowed. Alien knowledge, the military transformation had been as dramatic as the scientific revolution. Cut off from galactic warfare doctrines, humans had developed entirely new concepts of combat and strategy. They learned to think in 3 dimensions across vast distances, to coordinate actions between planets in real time, and to treat the entire solar system as a single battlefield. The old national armies had merged into something unprecedented in galactic history. A completely unified military force representing an entire species, Engineer Kate Sullivan guided her team through the final checks on the new propulsion system that would power humanity's next generation of spacecraft. They could not travel faster than light, but they had made conventional propulsion incredibly efficient and powerful. Human ships could accelerate harder and longer than any vessel in galactic databases, making them capable of maneuvers that would destroy alien crews through gravitational forces. Alone, Kate's innovations had come from necessity rather than choice. Without access to alien materials and energy sources, human engineers had learned to extract maximum performance from basic elements found in their solar system. They developed new alloys, new energy storage systems, and new manufacturing techniques that made their isolated civilization remarkably self-sufficient. The asteroid belt had become humanity's greatest resource. Massive mining operations stripped useful materials from countless rocks, feeding the construction projects that transformed every world in the solar system. Ceres had become a manufacturing hub. Vesta hosted the primary military academies, and dozens of smaller asteroids served as research stations and defensive platforms. Dr. Nina Walsh led the theoretical physics division that had achieved what alien scientists considered impossible. Working from first principles without alien interference, human researchers had developed new understandings of fundamental forces. Their mathematics was different, their experimental methods were unique, and their conclusions challenged everything. The galactic community thought they knew about the universe. Nina's team had cracked problems that had puzzled alien civilizations for millennia. They understood quantum mechanics in ways that made the Council's barrier technology seem primitive. They had developed new approaches to energy generation that made their isolated civilization more powerful than many galactic members. Most importantly, they had learned to think beyond the limitations that had constrained alien development for thousands of years. The social changes had been as profound as the technological advances. Humanity had learned to function as a single organism spread across multiple worlds. Children born on Mars thought of themselves as human first and Martian second. Workers on Jupiter's moons coordinated effortlessly with teams on Earth's surface. The old divisions of race, religion, and nationality had not disappeared. But they had become secondary to the shared identity. Forged by isolation and common purpose, education had been revolutionized to prepare every human for their role in the greater mission. Children learned mathematics and engineering alongside history and philosophy. They studied the Council's decision to abandon humanity and understood that they must become strong enough to ensure it never happened again. Every human knew that. They were part of something larger than themselves, something that would eventually return to the galaxy that had rejected them. By the 30th year of quarantine, humanity had colonized every significant body in their solar system. By the 40th year, they had built industrial capacity that rivaled major galactic civilizations. By the 50th year, they had become something entirely new, a unified, technologically advanced, and utterly determined species with a single, shared goal. The quantum barriers still hummed with energy at the edges of the solar system, keeping humanity trapped in their cosmic prison. But those same barriers also protected the galaxy from what humanity was becoming. The Council had wanted to contain a threat, but instead they had created something far more dangerous, a civilization that had learned to thrive in isolation and was growing stronger with each passing year. As Amy Clark finished her daily research review, she looked once more at the transformed solar system around her. Every world buzzed with activity, every human worked toward their common future, and every day brought them closer to the moment when they would test their prison's strength. The Council had given them 50 years to become something new, and humanity had used every single day of that gift to evolve beyond their captor's worst fears. Scout Commander Yethdal adjusted the sensors on her monitoring vessel as it approached the edge of the Sol system. The Galactic Council had finally decided to check on their quarantined prisoners after 50 years of complete silence. Most Council members expected to find either empty space where Earth once orbited or perhaps a few scattered settlements, struggling to survive with primitive technology. Yethdal herself had volunteered for this mission because she believed humans deserved a second chance. If they had somehow managed to survive their isolation, the quantum barriers appeared on her displays as a shimmering wall of energy that stretched across space in all directions. These barriers had contained humanity for 5 decades, preventing any communication or travel beyond their solar system. The technology was considered unbreakable by galactic standards, designed by the greatest minds in Council history and powered by energy sources that could run for centuries without maintenance. Yethdal activated her scanner array and began penetrating the barriers with monitoring beams. The first readings made her pause and check her equipment. Something was wrong with the data. According to her instruments, the space inside the barriers was filled with artificial structures on a scale that seemed impossible for a quarantined civilization. She recalibrated her sensors and tried again. The readings remained the same. Massive orbital platforms surrounded every planet in the system. Asteroid mining operations covered the space between worlds. Most shocking of all were the fleets of spacecraft that moved through the system in organized formations that suggested military precision and technological sophistication. Council Prime, the Scout Commander Yethdal reporting from Sol System perimeter. She transmitted through quantum communication arrays. Initial scans indicate that humanity has not only survived quarantine but has achieved industrial development far beyond our projections. Requesting immediate analysis team and extended observation period. The response came quickly from High Counselor Veltar himself. Clarify your report, Commander. Are you suggesting the humans have maintained technological civilization during their isolation? Yethdal transmitted her sensor data to Council headquarters and waited for their reaction. She knew what she was seeing would shock the leadership who had assumed humanity would collapse without galactic guidance and technology. The evidence suggested exactly the opposite had occurred. Admiral Carl Brooks stood in the command center of Titan Base, watching the alien scout ship probe their barriers from a safe distance. Human sensors had detected the Council vessel hours before it arrived, and every defensive installation in the solar system was now tracking its movements. Carl had been waiting for this moment since the quarantine began, knowing that eventually the Council would return to check on their prisoners. The detection systems built into the barriers worked both ways. While the Council could monitor human activities, humans had learned to monitor Council activities in return. Carl's intelligence teams had been tracking Council ship movements near their system for months, preparing for exactly this scenario. "Sir, should we respond to their scans?" asked Captain Jenny Walsh, the duty officer for the Outer System Defense Network. Carl shook his head. "Let them look. They want to see what 50 years of isolation has done to us. I think they're going to be very surprised by what they find." The human fleet had grown far beyond what any Council member could imagine. Thousands of vessels now patrolled the solar system, built in shipyards that operated around the clock on every major world. These ships were designed according to human principles rather than alien aesthetics, focusing on functionality and durability over the elegant curves preferred by galactic civilizations. Dr. Nina Walsh received the alert about Council surveillance from her laboratory on Europa. At 78 years old, she was one of the few humans who remembered life before the quarantine. She had spent 5 decades working to understand, and eventually overcome the technology that imprisoned her species. Now that understanding was about to be put to the ultimate test. Nina's research team had achieved breakthroughs that the Council would find incomprehensible. Human science had developed along completely different lines than galactic knowledge, producing technologies and theories that challenged fundamental assumptions about physics and engineering. The isolation that was meant to weaken humanity had instead forced them to think beyond the limitations that constrained alien development. "Dr. Walsh, the Council Scout is conducting deep scans of our barrier systems," reported her assistant doctor, Mark Chun. "Should we activate defensive measures?" Nina smiled. "Not yet. Let them gather their data. They think they're observing animals in a cage, but they're actually studying predators who have learned to use the cage as a weapon." The quantum barriers that contained humanity were indeed sophisticated technology, but 50 years of study had revealed their weaknesses. Human scientists understood these barriers better than their original designers, because they had been forced to examine them from the inside with fresh perspectives and unlimited time for experimentation. Back on the Council monitoring ship, Yithtal struggled to process the data her sensors were collecting. The human industrial capacity appeared to exceed that of several major galactic civilizations combined. Their spacecraft designs were unlike anything in Council databases, suggesting technological development that had proceeded along entirely independent lines. Most disturbing were the energy readings from human installations. The power generation systems operating throughout the Sol system produced output levels that should have been impossible for a civilization cut off from galactic energy technologies. Somehow, humanity had developed new approaches to fundamental physics that made their isolated society remarkably self-sufficient and powerful. "Council Prime, I am transmitting continuous data streams for immediate analysis," Yithtal reported. "Recommend immediate consultation with the Defense Ministry and the Technology Assessment Division." The humans appear to have achieved capabilities that were not anticipated in the original quarantine projections. The response from Council headquarters came with unusual speed. "Commander, maintain observation position but do not approach the barriers. Council analysis teams are studying your data and will provide new instructions within 1 standard day." Yithtal knew that her discovery would send shockwaves through the galactic government. The Council had assumed that quarantine would either destroy humanity or reduce them to helpless primitives begging for readmission to galactic society. Instead, the humans appeared to have used their isolation to become something new and potentially dangerous. On Earth, President Elena Rodriguez convened an emergency session of the Solar Congress. Representatives from every human world gathered in the capital city to discuss their response to Council surveillance. The moment they had prepared for during 50 years of isolation had finally arrived. "Fellow humans," Elena began, addressing the assembled delegates, "the Council has returned to observe what their quarantine has accomplished. I think it's time we showed them exactly what they created when they abandoned us to silence." The humans had learned patience during their decades of imprisonment, but they had not forgotten the injustice of their treatment. Every man, woman, and child in the solar system knew the story of the council vote that condemned them to isolation. Every human understood that they were no longer the same species that had been rejected by galactic civilization. As council analysis team studied the disturbing data from Sol System, humanity prepared to demonstrate the price of leaving them in silence for 50 years. The Watchers had returned, but they were about to discover that the prisoners had become something far more dangerous than anything they had tried to contain. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of receiving the surveillance data from Sol System. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered in the ancient chambers, where humanity's fate had been decided 50 years earlier. The mood was very different now as alien leaders studied reports that challenged everything they thought they knew about their quarantined prisoners. High Counselor Valtar's massive form dominated the central platform as he addressed the assembled delegates. The monitoring data from the human system presents unprecedented challenges to galactic security. Our assumptions about quarantine effectiveness have proven incorrect. The isolated human civilization has achieved development levels that exceed our most optimistic projections by several orders of magnitude. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthic Empire stood to address the assembly. He looked older now, his metallic skin showing the wear of 5 decades in galactic politics. I warned this council 50 years ago that humans represented a threat to galactic stability. The quarantine was meant to contain that threat until they destroyed themselves or evolved beyond their aggressive nature. Instead, we have created something far worse. The holographic displays activated throughout the chamber, showing detailed scans of the Sol System. Alien delegates gasped as they saw the massive orbital installations, the extensive mining operations, and the fleets of vessels that moved through human space with military precision. This was not the primitive civilization they had expected to find after decades of isolation. Counselor Blackstar of the Trade Federation spoke with obvious alarm in his synthesized voice. Their industrial capacity appears to equal or exceed that of our major member worlds. How is this possible for a civilization cut off from galactic technology and resources? Dr. Kethener, the Council's chief science advisor, projected detailed analysis of human energy signatures. The humans have developed entirely new approaches to fundamental physics. Their power generation systems operate on principles we do not understand. Their manufacturing capabilities suggest technological advancement that has proceeded along independent lines during their quarantine period. President Elena Rodriguez stood before the assembled Solar Congress in Earth's capital city. Around her, representatives from every human world and major settlement watched as she prepared to address their former captors. 50 years of unity had transformed humanity into something the galaxy had never seen, a completely coordinated species with shared goals and unlimited determination. Fellow humans, the Council has spent the day analyzing what they found when they finally bothered to check on us, Elena said, her voice carrying across communication networks that connected every human settlement in the solar system. They are frightened by what we have become, and they should be. We are no longer the species they abandoned to silence. General Pete Mitchell commanded the liberation fleets that had been assembling at the edge of the solar system for the past decade. Human shipyards had worked continuously to build vessels designed for one specific purpose: breaking free from their quantum prison and ensuring that no alien civilization could ever trap them again. The ships were massive by galactic standards, built to carry the resources needed for extended operations far from home. They incorporated defensive systems that could withstand weapons humanity had never encountered, and offensive capabilities developed through 50 years of theoretical warfare planning. Most importantly, they were crewed by humans who had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. All fleet commanders, this is General Mitchell, he transmitted across the human naval network. Council surveillance vessels are maintaining position outside our barriers. Intelligence reports indicate emergency sessions are underway at Council headquarters. Begin final preparations for barrier penetration operations. Dr. Alex Green worked feverishly in his laboratory on Ganymede. making final adjustments to the breakthrough that would change everything. The quantum barriers that imprisoned humanity were indeed sophisticated technology, but human understanding of quantum mechanics had evolved far beyond the level of their designers. Alex had spent 30 years studying barrier technology from the inside, and he had found the key to turning their prison into a weapon. "Dr. Green, are you certain the field inversion will work?" asked his research partner, Dr. Lisa Park. "If we miscalculate, we could destroy the entire solar system instead of just the barriers," Alex nodded grimly. "The mathematics are solid. We can reverse the quantum field polarity and turn the barriers into projectors instead of containers. Instead of keeping us inside, they will keep everyone else trapped in their home systems. The Council will experience exactly what they did to us, but on a galactic scale." The technology was breathtaking in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. The same energy systems that had contained humanity could be modified to project quantum barriers around any location in the galaxy. The Council's member worlds could be isolated just as effectively as humanity had been, but without 50 years of preparation for independence, back in the Council chambers, desperate debates raged about how to respond to the human situation. Some delegates proposed immediate military action to destroy the Sol system before humanity could escape their containment. Others suggested negotiation and peaceful integration. A few recommended fleeing to distant galaxies rather than face whatever humanity had become. "The barriers are showing instability," reported Monitoring Division Chief Yethkul. "Human activities near the containment field are producing energy fluctuations we cannot explain. Our technical analysis suggests they may be attempting to breach the quantum walls." Counselor Veltar processed this information with growing alarm. "How long before potential barrier failure?" "Unknown, High Counselor. Human technology operates on principles our scientists cannot analyze. We have no reliable method for predicting their capabilities or timeline." The irony was not lost on the more perceptive council members. Their attempt to contain humanity by cutting them off from galactic knowledge had forced humans to develop their own understanding of the universe. That independent development had produced technologies and capabilities that the Council could not comprehend or counter. Admiral Sam Taylor received surrender offers from 3 different Council factions before the barriers had even been tested. Some Council members wanted to negotiate before humanity demonstrated their true capabilities. Others proposed preemptive strikes against human installations. A third group suggested immediate evacuation of Council core worlds. "Ma'am, how should we respond to the Council communications?" asked Captain Roy Adams. Taylor's communications officer. Sam looked at the messages offering everything from full Council membership to territorial concessions to shared technology agreements. After 50 years of silence, the aliens were suddenly very eager to talk. "Send a single response to all Council communications," Sam ordered. "Tell them that humanity appreciates their sudden interest in communication, but we decline all offers." They had 50 years to reconsider their decision. We used that time to become something they cannot control or contain. Now they will learn the price of leaving us in silence. The quantum barriers began fluctuating as human engineering teams made final preparations for their escape. Across the galaxy, Council fleets scrambled to respond to a threat they could not understand or predict. The civilization that had ruled the galaxy for millennia was about to discover that their greatest mistake was underestimating the species they had tried to eliminate through isolation. The quantum barriers around Sol System collapsed at exactly 1422 Galactic Standard Time on a Tuesday morning. The energy walls that had contained humanity for 50 years simply vanished as if they had never existed. Dr. Alex Green watched from his laboratory on Ganymede as his calculations proved correct, and the prison that had held his species finally opened. Within minutes, human fleets poured out of their former cage like water through a broken dam. Admiral Kelly Stone led the first wave of ships toward the galactic core, her massive flagship cutting through space at speeds that made Council observers struggle to track their movements. Behind her came thousands of vessels carrying 50 Years of human anger and determination dot the council monitoring stations scattered throughout. Nearby systems sent frantic warnings to their headquarters, but those warnings arrived too late to matter. Human technology had advanced far beyond galactic understanding during the isolation years. Their ships moved faster, hit harder, and endured more punishment than anything in council databases. Fleet Admiral Kelly Stone stood on the bridge of her command ship as Earth fell away behind them. She had been born in the 20th year of the quarantine and had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. Every human in the fleet understood their mission with perfect clarity: ensure that no alien civilization could ever again trap humanity in a cage. All ships, this is Admiral Stone, she transmitted across the human fleet network. We have waited 50 years for this day. The Council thought isolation would weaken us, but instead it made us stronger than they could imagine. Today we take our rightful place in the galaxy, and we make certain that no species will ever again underestimate humanity. The first Council fleet to intercept the human advance was the 3rd Defense Group, 12 heavy cruisers and their escort vessels commanded by Admiral Vorthak of the Hegemony Navy. They had positioned themselves along the most likely human approach route, confident that their advanced weapons and superior numbers would stop any escape attempt. Admiral Vorthak watched his tactical displays with growing confusion as human ships appeared on his sensors. The vessels were larger than expected and moved with precision that suggested extensive military training. Most disturbing was their approach vector, which ignored established galactic navigation routes and instead took the most direct path toward Council territory. All ships prepare for battle, Vorthak ordered. Target the lead human vessels and demonstrate galactic military superiority. These primitives must learn their place in the established order. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. Human ships absorbed the Council's most powerful weapons without significant damage and responded with firepower that overwhelmed alien defensive systems in seconds. When the engagement ended, the 3rd Defense Group no longer existed and human fleets continued their advance without slowing down. Commander Don Roberts led the second wave of human forces toward Council Central, the massive space station that served as the galactic government's headquarters. His ships carried specialized equipment designed for one specific purpose: establishing human control over the Council's administrative and military command systems. The station was enormous beyond human imagination, a city in space that housed millions of alien beings and contained the records of 10,000 years of galactic civilization. It was also completely defenseless against the technology humanity had developed during their isolation. Council security forces tried desperately to mount a defense, but their weapons and tactics were designed to maintain order among civilized species who followed established rules of warfare. They had no experience fighting an enemy that ignored those rules and possessed technology they could not understand or counter. Dan's forces took control of Council Central without destroying a single critical system. The human assault was surgical in its precision, neutralizing defensive systems while preserving the administrative infrastructure that would be needed to manage galactic affairs under new leadership. High Counselor Veltar found himself trapped in the same chambers where humanity's quarantine had been decided 50 years earlier. Human soldiers now stood guard at every entrance, their weapons trained on the alien leaders who had once ruled the galaxy with absolute authority. The massive aliens struggled to comprehend how completely the situation had changed in such a short time. You cannot simply take control of galactic civilization, Veltar protested to the human officer who now commanded his former seat of power. There are treaties, laws, established procedures for resolving disputes between species. Captain Sarah Mitchell, daughter of the general who had led the liberation fleets, looked at the former council leader with the cold expression that every human had learned during 50 years of abandonment. You're absolutely right about treaties and laws, Counselor. Those same treaties and laws that you ignored when you voted to imprison my species without trial or appeal. The former council races discovered that humanity had no intention of exterminating or enslaving them. The humans had learned valuable lessons during their isolation about the benefits of cooperation over conquest. But the power structure that had ruled the galaxy for millennia was dismantled completely and permanently. Species that had considered themselves superior found themselves reduced to junior partners in a new galactic order. Their advanced technology meant nothing when faced with human innovations they could not comprehend. Their ancient wisdom seemed useless against human determination that had been forged in cosmic isolation. Dr. Nina Walsh, now in her 80s, but still leading human scientific efforts, established research programs that would integrate alien knowledge with human discoveries. The combination produced breakthroughs that advanced galactic civilization by centuries in just a few years. The species that had tried to contain human aggression instead became beneficiaries of human innovation, President Elena Rodriguez addressed the former council members from the same podium where their leaders had once condemned humanity to silence. You left us alone for 50 years, believing we would disappear or destroy ourselves. Instead, we used that time to become something you never expected, a unified species that learned to thrive in darkness and emerge stronger than those who abandoned us. The transformation of galactic civilization proceeded with the same efficiency that had characterized human development during their quarantine years. Ancient trade routes were reorganized for maximum efficiency. Obsolete bureaucracies were replaced with streamlined administrative systems. Most importantly, the laws that govern relations between species were rewritten to prevent any civilization from ever again being abandoned to cosmic isolation. Commander Ryan Foster, now an old man who remembered the early days of the quarantine, stood in the council chambers where human fate had once been decided. Around him, representatives from dozens of alien species worked under human supervision to build a new galactic order based on cooperation rather than domination. Sir, the integration reports show remarkable progress, reported his aide, Lieutenant Colonel Beth Adams. Former council species are adapting to human leadership faster than our projections suggested. Resistance movements have been minimal and mostly peaceful. Ryan nodded as he reviewed the data. The aliens had learned the same lesson that humanity had discovered during their isolation. Cooperation achieved more than conflict when survival was at stake. The former rulers of the galaxy were discovering that human leadership was more effective and fair than their previous system had ever been. The age of the Galactic Council ended not with destruction or conquest, but with the simple realization that they had created their own replacement. Humanity took its place as the dominant galactic civilization, shaped by 50 years of silence into something that could never again be contained or controlled. The galaxy would remember this lesson for millennia to come. Never underestimate the species that learns to turn abandonment into strength.